Welcome to Shielded, the podcast dedicated to helping Florida's first responders understand the laws that affect their work and their lives. We bring clear answers, practical tips, and stories to help you when you need it most. If you're a first responder in Florida, this is your playbook. Be sure to check out all of our resources at bicklerlaw.com. I'm your host, Paolo Longo, and I'm here with my partner, Jeff Bickler. At Bickler & Longo, this is what we do. Now let's get into it. All right, welcome everybody back to Shielded, the podcast for first responders. Like we talked about last week, we promised you Karen Monda, and we are here to deliver today. Okay, guys. So if you listened to our episode with Doug, you heard his story, right? You heard about his career. You heard about some of the traumatic events that he went through. I particularly love the wheelbarrow analogy that he gave us. The couch. From being a cop to the couch, the moment that, he wasn't sure he was going to make it, right? But the thing that we didn't hear, and it's because Doug would be the first to admit this, I think, is the whole story. Because while he was going through all of his stuff, right, Karen, his wife, was right there with him, right? She's watching it. She's living it. She's doing everything she can to keep the family together. And then sort of out of this transformation, I mean, I like to analogize it, and Karen will tell us a little bit more, but like a phoenix out of the ashes, right? She kind of turned this situation into a mission. And so Karen Monda, she's the executive director of Survive First. She's got lots of fancy degrees from a school down the street at UCF that I'm going to pick her brain about earlier because I think it's a little bit ironic. She is also a trustee of the Florida Police Chiefs Association Education and Research Foundation. And on top of all that, she gets to run the day-to-day operations of what I would consider one of the preeminent and most important first responder mental health organizations anywhere around. She's also Doug's better half. We do have his permission to use that quote.
You did say that, yes.
Yes, and we are, and we told them we're going to get, the real story. So Karen, thank you for being here. Welcome. We appreciate your time.
Welcome, Karen. Welcome.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Paolo and Jeff. It's always good to see you guys. I'm grateful we live in close enough area that we can get together sometimes. So thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for having Doug on last week.
Now you guys have a fascinating story to tell and a really powerful mission. So we're just grateful that you're here with us, and we can give you a platform to talk a little bit about your journey and Survive First.
Yeah. And so, just kind of getting right into it, Karen, I mean, when Doug is going through all of the stuff that he told us about, right? And I mean, you're kind of standing there going, what in the hell is going on? What do I do? What can I do? What's the other side of that like?
So if I can, I'd like to backtrack just a tiny bit. So I actually did not know Doug when he had his failed suicide attempt. I met him maybe about 8 or 9 months after that happened. He was very open and honest with me about what he had been through, about everything in his career. And he was very honest with me about his suicide attempt. That said, because I wasn't born into this life. I hadn't been in this life of first response before. I didn't necessarily know what to expect. We fell in love immediately. But what I didn't realize was that after his suicide attempt, he really hadn't gotten the help that he needed. And so about 4 months after we met, he came very close to a second suicide attempt. And that is kind of where our story begins. He went into 6 weeks of inpatient treatment. And when he came home, there was another very personal but very traumatic event that occurred couple months after he got out of treatment. And so the wheels then fell off again.
So Karen, can I just ask you, and I think this is really instructive for people to understand too, right? You're coming into this relationship, you're seeing this. What kind of support did you find that was available, if any, for Doug at that juncture? Because this is really quite a long time ago, when we're thinking about the evolution of the law and the public understanding of the problem. So can you address that a little bit more?
Absolutely. This was, we met in September of 2013. In 2014, January 2014 is when things got very difficult for him again. And quite frankly, there really wasn't, as far as we knew, there wasn't much support at all. Support for him, and as well, support for me, even though we were dating at the time. This was very difficult for me. And so his chief of police contacted another chief of police, and through that, they kind of developed, what they were going to do with him. But at the time, there weren't tons of resources. So the option was for him to go to a treatment center down in South Florida, but it was not a first responder treatment center. Back then,
Is
we
that
really didn't.
Shatterproof? Do you know the name of that place? Or
No, it wasn't Shatterproof. I don't even think they're open anymore.
no, they're not.
I'm not sure when Shatterproof came about, but back then we didn't know if they were around. We didn't know about them back then. And so you're absolutely right. There wasn't a whole lot of support.
And you
That,
kind of
that
got lucky. I mean, wouldn't you agree that you had a really proactive police chief who took the bull by the horns and wanted to get involved in help, right?
Absolutely. He actually drove Doug down to the treatment center in his uniform just to tell him, hey, I've got you. You're going to come back, and you're going to come back to work. And I've got you when you come back to work. He went and picked him up when treatment was done. So his chief was incredible, and everybody who stepped in to rally around him and support him through this was absolutely amazing. We still, once that next traumatic event occurred when he got home, and this one was deeply personal for him,
Right.
that kind of set the wheels in motion for things to become very difficult for us because he was struggling. Fortunately for me, and this is what I teach about to spouses all the time, the importance of educating ourselves. Because when all of this happened and he went to treatment, I didn't know what to do. I mean, I had just met this guy. I had fallen in love with him, but quite frankly, it was scary. I had never dealt with anything like this before. So I always say I had two choices. I could run for the hills,
Cut and run.
or I could educate myself. And that's what I chose to do. I educated myself on everything that I could about first response professions. And then I dove into, though we were dating, I dove into anything I could find about relationships in first response, or marriages in the first responder profession. And then from there, I dove into educating myself as much as I could about mental health. Oh, what PTSD is. We think we know what depression is and anxiety is. But the fact of the matter is, I really did not truly understand the in-depth nuances, if you will, of these mental health conditions. And
Well,
by
and
educate,
particularly with regard to the first responder community, right? Because it
absolutely.
is unique. And I think it's really instructive and a valid point that you make, Karen, that, we have a general understanding of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, but this specific community has a unique relationship to these various conditions that when you started getting involved in this was really not all that well explicated. It wasn't understood. It hadn't been studied really to the extent that it has been now. So you were really a pioneer in getting involved in this.
Well, and also from the perspective of the spouse, right, or the family member, right? Because so much attention is given to the first responder, and of course, rightfully so, they're the ones needing the treatment. But the spouse's experience is its own kind of trauma, right? And so I would imagine when you're doing all this research, it's probably pretty thin, right? And so that's one of the things that I find so impressive about Survive First is that you guys spend a lot of time and energy and effort into, the other side of that coin. I mean, obviously we want to get the first responder the help that they need, but we can't do it at the expense of the rest of the family, right? And I find that's kind of aligns with what Jeff and I do a lot. I mean, I spend probably the majority of my time on the cases that I work on, PTSD cases, talking to the
The
spouse.
spouse. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
so I've known about that part of it for a long time because that's what we do from a daily basis. But I guess somebody on the outside looking in saying, oh, we got to treat these guys, we got to treat these guys. Of course we do. But there's also husbands and wives and kids that, need resources and helping too. Right. And so that I thought that was and I'd like to get into a little bit of that, when we start talking about Survive First and the things that you do, the advocacy for the spouses too, because I think it's underserved and super important.
Absolutely. Y- one of my favorite quotes is, the perfect marriage is two imperfect people who refuse to give up on each other. I believe that with my whole heart. Going back to when I say I educated myself and why I talk so much about the importance of not just spouses, but also first responders to educate themselves is because when we have a solid knowledge base of what issues can arise when we have a first responder who is struggling. Sure, some things at home may get difficult and sometimes those things may feel deeply personal, but for me, educating myself helped me to understand that this is not personal.
Right.
Though sometimes certain things felt deeply personal, I knew that it wasn't. I knew that nobody wants to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to yell at somebody. I'm going to be in a bad mood. I want my spouse to walk on eggshells. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says that. They actually, on the contrary, they wake up and they say, I hope I have a good day today. And so by educating myself, I was able to understand that some of the things we were going through, they weren't personal. And because I knew that, I was able then to take a step back and really think about, all right, well, how do we solve this problem?
That takes a bigger person, I'll tell you, and a real understanding, Karen. I think that's why the educational component is so important for spouses, right? Because we see this very frequently, and unfortunately, a lot of failed marriages that are secondary to this problem, right?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I also talk about a lot, and this is when I am talking to the first responder, and Doug chimes right in with this, is that our other half, right, the first responder spouse or significant other, we also have our own set of stress, right? So Doug talked about the wheelbarrow effect. He talks about it in the career. And then when we teach, we talk about it in the marriage. Two people, we both pick up that wheelbarrow together. But the other side of that is I had my own wheelbarrow as well. I had my own things from work that I was dealing with, my own stressors. And as Doug may have said on the podcast, stress on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10 is a 10. His 10 may be different than my 10, but my 10 is still a 10.
Still a 10. Yeah.
Yes. So,
Right, right. And so what was that moment? I mean, how did you turn all that education and focus and stuff into, where did the idea come from? Hey, we need to become advocates for this thing. I mean, how did Survive First get born?
sure. It took years. It took quite a few years of us working together to mitigate some of the stressors, to work together to solve the problems that we were having, to understand each other and to heal. And then when it comes to Survive First, I'm actually going to give it all to Doug. We call ourselves co-founders, but he really was the catalyst for that. It was his idea. He went back to work, and when he went back to work, he had some of his own guys come up to him and say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And one of the stories that he tells is one of his guys coming up and saying, I just had to go to the doctor and they want to put me on medication. Now they knew that Doug had just come back from treatment. And so this is why they were finally reaching out to somebody. And they
Right.
thought, let me ask Doug. And so Doug was able to have that really candid conversation. Okay, it's okay. Some people do need to be on medication. And he was able to be transparent and say, I take medication. And it's okay. There should not be a stigma to that if you need it. Um, and so it really was that moment when he went back to work and several of his own guys were asking him questions because now they're curious. Nobody wanted to talk about it before. But now that somebody went to treatment and came back and was able to come back to their job and do their job effectively, now they felt okay to start asking someone. And that was kind of the idea, or where the idea for Survive First
Yeah.
came. He came one day and said, I want to find a way to give back. And so that's kind of how it was born.
Well,
Right.
Doug,
Nobody wants to be the first guy to do it, but once the first guy does it, then it's like, okay, they made it, they're okay. We can talk about it.
yeah,
It's scary.
Yeah, it's
yeah, it
totally
is.
scary.
And Doug did mention that as sort of the genesis in his podcast with us. you talked about that moment and kind of the light switch going off for him and the need for advocacy. And then, of course, you came into this full bore with him, and you've taken on a leadership role in this organization now that's quite remarkable. And we're all very and have been very impressed, Karen, by the professional nature and the professional manner in which you handle this organization and how effective you guys have become as advocates for this community. I was just thinking as you were talking about what Paolo had said earlier and also your own experience that the wives so frequently in these cases take the lead because a lot of times, they are not really capable of doing it. They don't want to deal with the reality of maybe a lost career or a really significant mental health problem that, they just don't know where it's going to lead them. So frequently, that's where Paolo and I and all the attorneys in our practice end up speaking to spouses who become the real advocates,
Yeah.
for their husbands or wives who are, in the service. So I'm just curious about your own perspective on that. What are your thoughts about the wife's role in that whole process and advocating on behalf of their spouses?
Well, I think it's amazing when spouses do that because when we have our first responder who is really struggling, that is one of the last things that they want to do. They're afraid to reach out for help. And or not option. What can happen if they don't reach out for help? And as we know, many times it does is it either leads to loss of job, right? Because as things start to spiral, they're not thinking clearly. They're not making proper decisions at work. Cognitive processes and functions may go down. And so they may make a mistake that jeopardizes their job. And worse, they may lose their life.
Right.
So, but, I applaud every spouse that steps in because usually by the time the spouse steps in, they too are also suffering themselves.
Well,
And
then
just,
would you agree? I mean, that's why we got to do a better job of getting in front of these problems early. I mean, Paolo and I talk about that all the time. The earlier we can get involved in a situation, the more effective we're going to be in getting the person the medical care that they need and returning them to the job. It's always, unfortunately, we get all the crisis cases.
yeah,
So we get the calls and I mean, Karen, you have sent us people, Doug has sent us people who literally are undergoing internal investigations for some type of malfeasance or they've gotten in trouble for something and they're in danger of losing their job. And of course, it turns out that there's some underlying psychological issue that's at play. And those are very, very difficult cases for us to deal with from a legal perspective for obvious reasons.
right.
Yeah.
And it's one of the main concerns that we have as lawyers is trying to get the word out and get the help involved as early as possible so that we don't have the big disruption with the career and hopefully not as much at home either.
Yeah, and I tell my clients in the very first phone call, I mean, I think the number is probably close to 90% of my guys go back to work, right? I mean, they go back to work, right?
It's what we want.
We get in early, we get them treated, we get them taken care of, and they go finish their career. It doesn't mean that they're done treating forever, right? I mean, they need some follow-up and some
Sure.
counseling and somebody to talk to and all that's fine, but they all go back to work. It's very few and far between that we get somebody that's, beyond help. I mean, we do get those cases, unfortunately, but the overwhelming majority of our clients, even when they're in a bad spot, we can help them and there's resources and we get them back to work. So, I mean, we try to get that word out all the time. Call early and often. Call early and often.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact is, these are treatable conditions,
Right.
right? And so, first and foremost, is really being proactive about not just your mental health, but your overall wellness, right? Your emotional and mental wellness, but also your financial wellness, your physical wellness, your
Right.
social wellness. All of these things play a role. Our first responders, they see some terrible, terrible things. But if they start pushing their social connections away, or if they start spending money on frivolous things to try and find joy just because they're struggling, that's going to compound the problem even
Right.
more. It's dumping
Right.
more into your wheelbarrow. And so that is the part that I wish everyone could understand is that we, like you said, Jeff, we need to get ahead of this. We need to be proactive, and we need to be willing to actually have a conversation with ourselves, be true to ourselves. Today, when I was up in Daytona I was talking about different signs and symptoms, little things that we can pick up on sleeping patterns. I'm fortunate. I sleep 8 hours a night. Most first responders sleep less than six,
Yeah.
sometimes just 4 hours a night. But have they really taken a moment to ask themselves why? Is it because they're having night terrors? Well, if we're having night terrors, then we need to reach out to a therapist, somebody who can help us if we haven't already.
Right.
Is it because they're drinking too much caffeine at night? And so now they're waking up all the time. Is it because of shift work?
Right.
And there are certain things that are beyond our control, but there are also things that we can do that are within our control that can help us get better sleep patterns, right? Like setting our air conditioning up. People always say, "Oh my gosh," but this is research shows that
That's a
having your
studying
AC,
issue. You're right.
yes, between 60 degrees and 67 degrees, that is the
100%. Yep.
best temperature to sleep in. And, I said that today, and everyone, thought we're all from Florida, so that sounds really, really cold. And it is, but it doesn't mean freeze yourself out in your bedroom. It means keep the temperature cool, but you can cover yourself with a blanket and a comforter
Right.
and a weighted blanket like Doug and I do. There are so many things that we can do proactively to focus on self care. That if we do these little things every single day, when something seems a little bit off, we're going to take notice to that. And then the other part of that is like I said, really having an honest conversation with yourself and being okay with that honest conversation about how am I feeling? What weight am I carrying? Am I talking to my spouse about this? How much does my spouse want to know? See, sometimes as a spouse, we sit back and we want to know what happened in your day. We might not want to know every single detail, but I want to know when Doug walked through the door, I want to know, did he have a really, really hard day? And sometimes all that meant was he just needs to say to me, "Babe, I had a really tough day. I just need 15 or 20 minutes before I engage in family time."
Right. Right.
And those are the things that we can do to kind of to set us up for success.
Well, that
Right.
gets back to the spouse's role, which is so critical in this because, a wife or a husband is going to notice all of these signs, right? And hopefully those communications, if they're effective, can really begin to alleviate not only these issues, but identify some of the problems and some of the other stressors that you're talking about. Whether it's financial things or, overall health or poor eating habits or, whatever it might be, all of those stressors do add up and, jump into the wheelbarrow at some point using that analogy again.
Yeah, and all the mental stress certainly is going to affect your physical health too, right? I mean, we had a podcast a couple of weeks ago where we had Dr. Chernobelsky, one of the cardiologists that treats our our clients, saying, the correlation between mental health, PTSD, and cardiac health, it's a no-brainer, right? So if you're holding all this stress in, you're going to feel the effects physically, right? Your blood pressure is going to go up. You're going to, put yourself into AFib and things like that and have all kinds of stress-related physical problems that
Yeah.
is just going to it's going to compound the problem that
Every
much worse.
Everything's so much worse. And Jeff, you talked about communication. That really is key. And it's not just, oh, we're going to sit and talk to each other. It's again, being able to have an honest conversation with each other. And Doug and I didn't always know how to do that effectively, but
It's a
we
learned skill.
learned. Yeah, it is. It truly is a learned skill. And especially in this space, we learned over time what worked for us. Before I would walk on eggshells all the time because did he have a bad day? I'm not sure. He looks like he's upset about something. But it was as simple as us sitting down and having a conversation of, are you okay if I ask you for details about your day? Or, babe, how much do you want to know about my day? Or setting that standard, that routine of when I come home, I need some quiet time for 20 minutes. I can't immediately engage with the kids and homework and dinner and take the dog out and mow the yard.
Right.
And when we communicate those things and we communicate the why behind them, then as spouses, we're better able to come in and support. One of the things that I understand it, but I still kind of laugh about it. I hear our first responders all the time say, I don't want to be asked what I want for dinner. I don't want to make decisions when I get home. And that's okay, but we still have to make decisions when we get home. And I push back on that and I say, well, because Doug didn't want to be asked what he wanted for dinner. His response was always, I don't care. But I had to explain to him, and this is part of that communication, instead of me getting upset and saying, gosh, why can't he ever just tell me what he would like for dinner? At least I'm asking him, what would you like for dinner? I had to explain to him why I did not necessarily want that as an answer every time. Why? Because I love to cook, and I cook a homemade meal, full homemade from scratch meal every single night for dinner. And it was really important for me to put something on the table that I knew he was going to enjoy. So in his mind, it was, I don't care. I love everything that you cook. It doesn't matter. In my mind, I just want to know what it is that you are craving tonight. So what we came up with through that communication was, if I was going to ask him what he wanted for dinner, I would give him 2 to 3 choices.
That's
And
effective.
that solved the whole, not that it was ever a big issue, but I mean, that's just a simple little thing about communication. Okay, we're having a little bit of a communication breakdown because I want to cook for you every night. You don't want to answer that question, what do you want for dinner?
Yeah, and he
So,
perceives that as stress, right? It's
yes,
like, you're stressing me out. I mean, you're making me answer a can't you see
sure.
I'm
Well,
struggling over here?
I'm gonna take that tip home so I don't get liver and onions every night, right? Because if I don't care, then that's what I'm gonna get. Okay.
Exactly, right?
Right.
And so it was, okay, do you want steak? Do you want shrimp scampi? Or do you want grilled tuna?
That's
Those are your 3
brilliant. So you got
Yes,
3
please.
choices. Okay.
Yes, please.
There you
Yes.
go.
Well, we're going to the Mondas for dinner.
I'm
So
telling you what, I mean, it sounds like you do a great job there, Karen.
yeah.
So what is, I mean, I know that you go all over the place, Karen, and you travel and you guys do all your teaching and you're doing such great outreach. I think you were just in Alaska recently, right? So,
Doug was in Alaska.
no,
I
you
was
didn't
not.
go.
No.
So tell me, what are you guys doing as an organization, just in terms of your training? Give our audience a little bit more background and, what the mission is and what you guys are doing right now. And I know we just came out of that wonderful charity ball that you guys have every year, but just give
Thank you
us a
so
little
much.
bit of an overview so that, folks who are tuning into this will have a better understanding of what you guys do at Survive.
So our mission, I could rattle the whole thing off to you, but it's this long mission statement. But simply put, our mission is to save lives. It's to reduce suicide amongst first responders. And a big part of that also with our mission is also to just foster a greater sense of community amongst first responders and the people, the public that supports them. Because I will tell you, they feel like the public does not support them. And they do. They really do. We see it at our events, all of our events. I mean, it brings me to tears every time the community comes out and they know why they are there. They know they are there to support first responders. As far as how we're helping, we have education. We travel around the nation. We have our Hope education program, and that is basically a curated list of topics that we tailor to departments and agencies based on their needs, because needs in different agencies and departments are different. We have been to an area where the first responders that were there from that entire county responded to the Trump assassination attempt.
Right.
Then we also went and spoke to first responders that responded to the helicopter airplane crash or disaster that happened in Washington, D.C. last year. So the needs are very, very different. And so we really work hard to tailor our education to the needs of the department or agency that's asking us to come in for help. Obviously, we also provide peer support. I usually speak with the spouses, and then Doug and Raul, they handle the and Chris Scallon also, they handled the first responders when they call and they need assistance. Those guys are right there. They're absolutely amazing.
You guys are doing great work on that front. I can tell you personally from what I've
Yeah, no, and the reducing the loss of life is really, I mean, that strikes me. I mean, really, I was on a panel talking, I think it was 2016 or 17. I was asked to talk about first responder legal things, sort of a comparative around the country, what's going on. And so as I'm doing my research, I think that was the first year that in our country that we'd lost more first responders to suicide than we did by regular on the job deaths, because it's a dangerous job, right? Either it's you're getting burned up in a fire or shot by a bad guy or the danger is real enough. But to lose more first responders to suicide than to a dangerous job, that just struck me as somebody's got to do something, right? And so, when Jeff and I met you guys and got involved in your organization, I'm like, man, this is going to really do something good for people. And hopefully that number, we don't want to lose any. One is too many, right?
One is too many.
One is too many. And so I just found that really struck a chord with me, all those years ago.
And it continues.
yeah.
Year after year, we have more first responders that die by suicide than in the line of duty. And we know that the numbers that are reported are grossly
They're underreported.
Yeah. They're super low. They're super low.
And that's not because people collecting the data aren't doing a good job. They're doing a fabulous job at collecting data, but they rely on families reporting that data. And again, even outside of the first responder themselves, there is a stigma. So when somebody dies by suicide, many times the family doesn't really want people to know. So those organizations who are collecting that data, their data is only good as what is reported to them. But in Florida, and you guys are, I think, well aware of this, but in Florida, a Florida Department of Law Enforcement, they did some significant research over the last, I believe it was over the last 4 years. I could be wrong, 4 or 5 years, but they went back and they looked at all law enforcement deaths. And this was active and retired. And I believe that they may have included corrections in this study. And what they found was that in the time that they did the study, which I think included 4, maybe 5 years of data, each year, Florida alone lost over 40 law enforcement professionals.
Yeah,
We're
just
not even
law enforcement. Yeah.
We're not even talking about fire and dispatch. We're just talking about law enforcement professionals that were lost to suicide, over 40 each year. And the numbers that are being reported are like 4 or 5
A
in
fraction of
Florida.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, a fraction, absolutely. And again, no fault of the people who are collecting data. Their data is only as good as the people who are reporting it to them. The LE, obviously, they investigate these deaths, and so they have the records and the data there. And so when I heard that, I mean, it just, we knew the numbers were grossly underreported, but I did not realize to what magnitude. And
That's
if that is the
staggering.
case in Florida,
Yeah, that's
then
staggering.
that's happening everywhere. That's not just Florida. That's happening everywhere, I would assume.
Yeah, that just speaks to the continued stigma, like you said, related to this issue and the stigma associated with suicide and not really understanding complexity of these mental health issues.
Karen, something I've noticed just because Jeff and I have been representing this population for such a long time. At the beginning, the stigma was just terrible. I mean, nobody was talking about this, right? And then we spend the time, we get the law changed, we're advocating, we're running around Tallahassee trying to get better benefits and laws for these guys. Have you noticed, or what have you noticed, or, with the trend on that stigma getting not so bad, right? I mean, that stigma is going down. I feel it's getting better. I mean, certainly there's a long way to go, and certainly there's a lot more work that we have to do. But do you see it trending at least in the right direction?
There has been, there's been tremendous work in this space. Obviously, there's still work that needs to be done because we're losing first responders. I see it 2 ways. We are getting the word out there. So I do think that people are more willing to talk about it generally,
Right.
but there still is a stigma.
Yeah,
What
of
I
course.
see is that our younger generations are more willing to talk about it than those who may be closer to retirement that
Right.
have
Yeah, I see that every day, right?
yes, yes.
The guys, Jeff and I's generation, it's difficult still for them, right?
Well, they've
But
been stuffing it down for so long.
right,
In
right.
their entire career, they were taught, stuff it down, don't talk about it. And so after 20 years of doing that, I can only imagine it's not easy to say, okay, I'm going to talk about it now.
Right.
But it is getting better. That said, we do have, you know, a lot of first responders, even if it is just when we go and we speak, and maybe at the very end, we might say, anyone have any questions? And nobody wants to ask the questions, or it's
Right.
rare. But once everybody is sent on break, or we're not really standing up there asking anyone to raise their hand, I can't tell you how many, especially our first responders who are closer to retirement that have been in the profession for a long time. I can't tell you how many of them come up to Doug, Raul, not so much myself because I'm the spouse,
You're
right?
not
But
me.
they do.
I'm one of the
But
boys.
how many go to Doug and Raul and say, hey, thank you. You just saved my life. Or thank you. I'm going to go home and tell my wife how much I appreciate her and how much I love her. Or hey, thank you, Doug and Karen. I'm going to go home and we're going to talk about love languages because we talk about the importance of understanding love languages. And we're going to create alone time and honor it. We talk about that also. Create your own alone time, especially when you have kids at home,
Yeah.
right? And it's okay to do that.
Right.
Create your alone time, honor it so you can truly connect with one another. And the other thing I will say, Paolo, is over the years, we have our treatment assistance fund, which is in place for first responders that are in need of mental health treatment, whether it is weekly therapy or even in usually most of the times it is inpatient treatment, but they're having a barrier to access because of financial hardship.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that was a question I was going to ask you. When people call in and people need help, right? How does the nuts and the bolts of Survive First? I mean, obviously you've got the counseling, you've got the talking, and you've got the support, but there's also some actual real help available, right?
Yeah, we have vetted therapists that we absolutely can. We don't necessarily ever recommend specific therapists or treatment centers because one size does not fit all.
Well,
I had to go to
they need some basic core competency though, with
yeah,
regard to this
absolutely.
community. That's the one of the biggest problems we face is, these therapists that have no background in treating first responders and no real understanding of the type of work.
Absolutely. They have to have that understanding. But again, even when you're talking about, let's say, a treatment center, one size does not fit all. If I needed to go to some sort of inpatient treatment for whatever it is, knowing what I know now, I would be looking for something that was set in nature, right? So we think it's very important to keep the power with the first responder, give them several options. Here's who we vetted. Here's who we know does good work, but you do your research and find what's going to be best for you. We're here to help you
Well, and
along
you
the
know what, Karen, this is a really, really important point, right? Where there's some divergence between what you guys are doing and what the law provides. So, when you say you want that first responder to be empowered with regard to choice of medical and all of that stuff, if we are under the workers' comp umbrella, there's no choice.
Yeah.
So
I know that's so
this is
tough.
part of the problem that we need to address legislatively. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Tallahassee to fix what
Yeah.
is a pretty bad law, but that's one of the biggest hurdles really to getting people to get these claims covered the way they need to be. Because there
Well,
should
and
not be, Karen, there shouldn't, I heard you say barrier to care, right? And the
there
financial
shouldn't
issues.
be
That is really what our workers' comp system is intended to do, is to remove those barriers to care,
those barriers.
right? And provide for the care and treatment of this occupational disease, basically.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
there's this huge disconnect, and you guys shouldn't be having to use those funds that are so thoughtfully raised to pay for something that is essentially a work-related condition, and should be treated as such. But again, that's just one of these ongoing issues that we struggle with as we're dealing with, our clients in this space.
Yeah, yeah, and, I really do. I believe when these guys and these gals are struggling, they already, and I hate to use the word power, but it is what it is, right? They they feel like their power has been taken away from them.
Right.
Everything is falling apart. So, we believe in walking alongside them, but also empowering them to, you can do this. Here are the resources for you to look at. You just have to find out what you think is going to best fit you. And then we can step in if there is that financial barrier, if workman's comp is not paying for it, or if it's not a workman's comp case, right? We can step in, and if they meet our eligibility requirements, we can fund up to $2,000 for them to get the assistance that they need.
That's really
Essentially,
nice.
really, it's pretty much, for inpatient treatment, it's like a deductible,
Right.
or, it can cover the cost of several therapy sessions.
Well, and Karen, we can get this is the thing that is really not well understood. We can get those inpatient treatment facilities paid for, if these are workers' compensation cases. So it's another, when you're talking about empowering these first responders, this is another way to do it, is through the appropriate utilization of the law and making sure
Absolutely.
that these benefits are paid in the way that the law intends.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. And I think that this is what you were saying before, that sometimes they don't have a choice of where to go.
Right.
And we have seen that as well, where we have a first responder that reaches out, and I'm talking just insurance at this point, not workman's comp, but even their insurance will not allow them to go out of a specific area, even though we know that in that specific area, there aren't any either first responder specific treatment centers or
Qualified providers.
Nothing on the provided list or approved list or things like that.
yeah, yeah. So there's so much work that needs to be done, but there's also been a lot of good work that has been done, and you two are a huge part of that as advocates for these guys and gals and their families.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Karen.
I know. We thank you.
Well,
The work that you guys have done is incredible.
we could go on. I mean, we could go on talking about this endlessly. We already ran well beyond what we typically do.
I can talk forever.
Well, and we can too, Karen. And I mean, this is such a great, instructive discussion. But are there any final thoughts, or anything you want to plug about Survive First? And like I said, we just came out of that gala. I'm sure you're already planning for next year. Is it anything
I am.
that we can help you with, or that you want to
I
plug?
I Well, I'll be reaching out to you guys about the gala for sure. I am. I'm already planning for next year. If you guys are in Central Florida, anyone listening, if you're in Central Florida, this is truly a night for you. I mean, it is a fundraiser, but the bigger picture to it is we roll the red carpet out for our first responders. And that is why it's not just a Night with the Stars gala, it's a Night with the Stars First Responder gala, because the most important thing to us is that our first responders know that this night was actually put on for them. So if you're in the Central Florida area, it's looking like we're going to be shooting for April 10th next year. So we would love for you to join us. In general, with Survive First, just know we are a resource, and we are here to help first responders across the nation, but we are based right here in Central Florida. If anybody needs anything.
And you guys are a nonprofit. You accept donations, all that good
Yes,
stuff.
yes, we do. We do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
And we'll put all the info in the show notes, but give us the website and the number, just so for people listening, they can reach right away.
Absolutely. So our website is www.survivefirst.us. We actually do not have a phone number because we don't have the manpower to answer the phone, but we do have on our website, or I'll just put it here, you can reach out to contact@survivefirst.us. Every single one of those comes directly to me, and Doug would agree with this. My phone is glued to my hip. Computer is glued to my lap usually. And so no matter where we are, those are coming directly through to me. So if anybody reaches out through contact@survivefirst.us, it's going to come directly to me, and it's going to get to the appropriate person, whether it is someone in need of peer support. I will have Doug, Raul, or Chris respond. If it's something about any of our programs, our education, our treatment assistance fund, or a department looking for resources, that's me, and I will respond and send whatever information. I love doing Zoom calls. Relationships are really, really important to us. And so just know anybody, if you reach out, we're,
You're a
for
Zoom
resources,
call away.
we're
Zoom
probably
call
going
away.
to ask for a Zoom call just because we know how important it is that you have that connection in that
Right.
community.
Right.
And that's very important to us. You have to have that trust and know that who it is that you're talking to on the other line, whether you're a first responder, a family member, a donor, those relationships are so important because, as I always say, once you reach out to us, and I've said this to you guys, your family.
Right.
I call it our Survive First family, and that truly is what we believe.
Well, Karen, we feel exactly the same way about you. So thank you for saying that. We really appreciate having you on the podcast with us. Okay.
We do.
Thank
It's really been an honor for us. And with Jeff and I mean, I'm going to speak for him. We love you guys. We love the
you.
organization. You're 10 years in, and we're looking forward to the next 10 and the next 20, so I just, we're going to support you guys, always count on us for a table at the gala we're in.
Thank you.
But thanks again. And regards to Doug, and tell him thanks for his time too. So we'll
I
talk to you.
will. He's in Colorado right now. Got back on Saturday night from Alaska, had Sunday, and then headed out to Colorado. Didn't really pack well for that. He FaceTimed me this morning. It was snowing, and I said, "Where's your jacket?" He's like, "I did not bring a jacket."
Travel man.
Well, that's what he gets. Well,
That's
thanks
what
so
he
much,
gets.
Karen.
Thank you so
All
much,
right.
guys.
Thank you, Karen. We'll see you
We'll talk
soon.
to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Shielded. At Bickler & Longo, this is what we do. We've represented thousands of first responders across the state of Florida. If you need assistance, don't wait. Please reach out. To learn more, head over to bicklerlaw.com or email us at info@bicklerlaw.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Bickler Law. And if you found today's episode to be helpful, please share it with a fellow first responder who might need to hear it. Until next time, stay safe, and thank you for all you do.